Hello, my name is 𝗔𝗿𝗺𝗍𝗂. I'm the developer of the 𝗔𝗿𝗺𝗺, and I'm sitting here today with fascia expert Patrick Nemzo, who runs the very successful fascia channel on YouTube and Instagram. Patrick, maybe a quick word about you and what you do.
Yes, hello, I'm Patrick Nemzo. As Jan already said, a fascia channel on YouTube. I'm the head of the Fascia Center in Hamburg. We have 3 locations, and we help people who have problems with their fascia from morning to night.
Okay, great. Exactly why are we both sitting here? Because I keep getting questions from my customers or interested parties about the 𝗔𝗿𝗺𝗺, how it should be used, how to do what so that you don't do anything wrong, how it should be used. And of course, I can tell you a lot about it, but I can also give you some information from a professional point of view so that you are a bit more confident and can also listen to some expert advice. Let's start with the first question, which I get asked very often and very frequently. It's how often and when and for how long I should work with the arm bundle to massage the arm muscles. And that's one thing from my point of view, of course, but what does Patrick or the expert say about how it affects the fascia?
In principle, the same rules apply to massage techniques or a massage device like this as ultimately apply to us from the therapeutic side. And I'm a fan of less is more. So in short, so that you understand what it's all about, I always think of it like an engine in a car. Yes, a combustion engine. And the engine is now off. That means there's no regeneration or anything else going on. Of course, there's always a little bit going on, but it doesn't have to be in memory. And we are now simply trying to start the engine by massaging it a little and therefore also getting some blood flow into it and so on. But what can happen if you do too much there is that the engine keeps revving up, and at some point you reach the red speed range, i.e. the negative components. In other words, you have to be a bit careful. That's why I'm a friend. I would rather recommend, I think that's where the next question comes in, how often do I have to do it? I would rather recommend making the massage session shorter. In other words, 10 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes or so. And rather 3 times a day so that the body has enough time to regenerate. Because you mustn't forget that growth takes place during regeneration. In other words, the change is not in the moment, but afterwards. With the massage technique, you give the body an impulse to improve the situation again. And the body actually does the work. You only provide the impetus. And that's just important, which is often the approach that is sometimes neglected by athletes, for example, that growth during training simply takes place during regeneration.
Okay, well, thanks for the information. Another thing is always the pace. So I don't realize myself when I've worked with it, or the customers when they come and do it, that you'd rather go too fast. Would rather go too fast. What is the right pace from your point of view? Always start at the wrist and only massage in one direction. And not squeeze the blood into your fingers. I think that's also an important thing, isn't it?
Takes place. Yes, exactly. That's quite funny because you're addressing really exciting topics, and I can only give my opinion because I know that there are therapists who have a different opinion to mine. So, in short, if we take a fascia roller like this, we actually have 2 hard foam rollers here at 𝗔𝗿𝗺𝗺. Then the idea of loosening stuck fascia is really like an iron. So, if I have a wave in here like this and I go over it too quickly, I always imagine that I'm ironing the crease in properly and actually making the problem worse. That's the mindset for now. And what we want to do is basically smooth the whole thing out again with the iron. And I can't do that by scrubbing over it like a madman, but by trying to really smooth it out. That's why, and we'll come back to this later, there are various tools that you can use here, massage tools, which also have different tasks. Yes. And if we now look at this fascia aspect, that's my construction site, then it's already the case that we really iron. Imagine that we iron, and you don't iron like a madman, you just go through it really, really slowly. And what I always recommend, even for people who don't have an arm miracle now, who are still doing it old school, as you've already mentioned in your videos, it's not about doing this, but really trying to go slowly. And if you notice that there are pain points, then stay there for a while and wait until the body resolves this pain point, and only then do you move on. and you can actually adjust the automatic pressure here to exactly how it feels good for you. In other words, do you want a little more pressure? Do you want a little less pressure? And do you really always want it to be a sensible pressure? In other words, that you realize, okay, something is happening, but not that it's no longer bearable in terms of pain, because that would be red speed again.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Patrick, please tell us again what the direction is all about. Direction.
Exactly. So that's actually what it's very, very interesting discussion on my YouTube channel. I regularly get scolded for it, is that when you train as a therapist in Germany, you always learn that the lymph goes in the direction, as Janice just showed, in the direction upwards. And we should always do massage techniques in the direction of the lymph, i.e. towards the heart. In other words, from a German perspective, you always have to do it in this one direction only. What's exciting is that if we look much further east, namely in Asia and the CCM and Crown, they have a completely different view of things. They say, well, I have a problem here, it has to go away from the body. They're going in exactly the opposite direction to us. The Americans have a third opinion, because they actually look at it like this. If I have a problem here, therapeutically speaking, then I have to get it away from the joint, which means I work here and there. And you see, there are 3 different continents, 3 different opinions, and all therapists are totally convinced that only one thing works. The bottom line of the study is that it doesn't really matter, point 1. And point 2, my personal opinion is, well, bottom line, there's this one, and this one, and all 3 are still alive. All 3 seem to work. In other words, it's something that I think is wrongly held in extremely high esteem in Germany, because it's really something that is only seen in Germany in such a way that you can only do it in one direction, which is also difficult with this massage device, to only do it in one direction.
Yes, but in a good way.
And that's so much about it. Every time I count, please take that away from the body, make at least one comment about it. How can you claim Satan's work? How can you claim that? And then I say, well, if you look over to Asia, there are a few more people than us, and they've been doing it for a long time, and not just since yesterday. TCM is thousands of years old.
Okay, thank you. Yes, to the next question, and I'm asked again and again, which muscle areas does this actually affect in the arm? Are there always the main muscles in the forearm? It's more specifically about the forearm muscles. What can you do about this? I noticed that the problem for me was the upper muscles, and when I massaged them and then worked on the underside with various elements, including balls, although I had more of a problem up here, I noticed that there were points down here on the outside where I was like, oh, what's going on there? What's that all about?
That's a very good question. So in terms of fascia, the difference between fascia therapists and other therapists is that we don't think so much in terms of individual structures. We don't think about this one muscle, we look at the whole system. If you take a look at my channel and click on 1 or 2 videos, you'll see that when I have problems somewhere in my arm, I always look at the cervical spine and thoracic spine first, because all the muscles, nerves, and so on ultimately come from this area. This means that I always have to work on the entire area. Ultimately, this also applies to the massager. I will never be able to work on just this one muscle anyway. This will inevitably also affect the neighboring muscles and so on. Of course, we are talking about flexors, extensors, and this whole region close to the joint. That causes us the most problems in practice. But what you have already found out yourself is relatively good. Please don't just work on this one point, but work on the whole thing. This is another important point where we need to raise our index finger. Watch out, you shouldn't turn over the joint. Why? We've just talked a bit about fascia and how to do it with the stirrups. I've already covered all that. On the bone, where I really only have bones here, we have relatively little fascia over it. So there is, but not like we have here, where we can really achieve something. That means it doesn't do us any good, and it only hurts. So it does nothing and hurts. It's a bad combination. Don't do it. You'll notice it doesn't feel good. What I can do is work as close to the bone as possible. I have these balls for that. We'll come back to that later. But actually, just scrubbing the bones is just brainless.
Okay, counterproductive.
That's missing the point and just doesn't help.
Maybe we'll get to the various elements of the arm miracle now, because we've already talked about them. On the one hand, of course, there's the fascia roll, then there's a double wooden ball, there's a single ball, or you can use 2 fascia rolls. When I started using them, a short journey into the past, why I built it in the first place, because I have really bad problems with my forearm muscles. I took various measures myself and was taught how to work with the fascia roll at home. It was far too time-consuming and too uncomfortable for me. And as I'm always a bit lazy by nature, I thought to myself, man, what can you build to make it a bit easier? And that's how the Armwunder came about. And yes, there are now various inserts that you can put in there. Yes, I'll also briefly show you how the elements are replaced. It's quite a simple mechanism. I simply loosen the knurled nut, take out the locking block, and can then replace the elements and, of course, put them back in the other way round. I started using these 2 fascia rollers when I had problems with my arm muscles. And for me, it felt like I simply had a wider support and wasn't going in at certain points. In my mind, the arm miracle came about anyway when I had a kind of pasta press or mangle in my head. And that's basically what it is almost. The only difference is that I can easily adjust the massage pressure. And what effect does it have when I work with these 2 fascia rollers here, for example, as opposed to the wooden balls?
First of all, of course, you have the envy of all therapists on your side because this is an absolutely brilliant invention. In principle, this is what every therapist wants their patients to have: a defined pressure that can be adjusted accordingly. As a customer, you can set how much pressure you want. And that's exactly what I said about the stirrups. And I would actually always recommend starting like John here when you have a new set. Very slowly, maybe even a little slower than John. Go over there at the same pace and start by massaging the whole area. So really this ironing technique. Once you've done this for a while, a week or 2 or so, you'll realize that it's not so painful anymore. But there are still individual points that are really nice. There are trigger points, so pain points where I say this one point, that's it. And then we come to the next elements. You've also included them. They're pretty ingenious. I would have just built it like this, but of course it's also brilliant. The other 2, tell us what else you've got there.
As I said, I started with this double wooden sphere. From my perspective, I was looking for a way to go a little deeper into the fabric. And of course, I succeeded very well with these spheres. 2 balls, so I have a bit of pressure on the arm muscles from 2 sides. Arm muscles from 2 sides, and you'll notice a big difference compared to the fascia roller. Of course, I also use it to work the upper muscles, or I can simply turn it around again and then use it to work the lower muscles as well. From your point of view, does it make sense to work with these wooden balls or with balls at all?
I can also say that as a therapist working manually, you always have to work with your arms. I, on the other hand, am of course already a bit involved. I've left the fascia rolls behind and am now actually using the balls a bit and always use them in this way. That I use the double ball there, the single ball, and then use the double ball as a guide rail to define exactly where the point is. Of course, I also have pressure here, but I really get this one point, what I said, this one nasty point that still hurts. And what I can do really well here is to get really, really close to the bone and solve it. As I said, we don't want to work on the bone, but as close to it as possible. And it's really nice to massage the points here.
In other words, if you notice that something is hardened or whatever, then you stay on the point.
And stay on the point, exactly. And let's also take another look at this point here. Stay there a little, and maybe I'll realize again that I can now put a little more pressure on it, because put a bit more pressure on it, because that's okay. As I said, always be good to yourself. That's the most important thing. If it's not bearable, then it's not the right thing to do, then you've done too much. And now, for example, I have a specific point here that's pretty stupid. And now I just wait and let my body work a bit. And now I realize that it's slowly getting better and I move on. And shortly after that is the next point. That way I can really focus on the individual points again, because of course with the fascia roll, which is why I would always use it as a basic first, I tend to make it more flat. I can massage very, very precisely at specific points and can of course adjust this super well using my guide, because nothing slips away thanks to this double ball. I think that's pretty ingenious.
Okay.
So congratulations to you.
Because of the pressure, it's not called the 𝗔𝗿𝗺𝗺𝗿 for nothing. So you can really get down to business. Yeah, cool. Something important for you who are watching right now. Yes, something that might also be interesting for some of you. I told you there was a discount code. The discount code is called Fascia Channel. So if you enter it in the order form, you'll get 10% off the Arm Wonders sets. And that can make some people very happy. That's been thrown in again. We promised that, that's right, exactly right. And now I have one more thing, which I'm always asked, whether I can only use the Arm Miracle on the forearm muscles or whether it also works for other parts of the body. Yes, that's right, that's a good question. I've had some women who also get their legs through it. I don't get them myself. But as I said, I don't want to go into that any further. But the upper arm, the biceps and the triceps, I can do them quite well. That's why I'm rebuilding it a bit again. And
I think it's really great how easy it is to rebuild, that you don't have to just undo the screw and click it out and that's it.
It took me almost months to get the changing mechanism right. Now you can see the simple thing, but it really took a long time. Exactly, the biceps and triceps. You can actually get a pretty good grip on them. I do this by putting the palm of my hand up. By doing this, I actually take the elbow joint out as far as possible because I don't always want to roll over the elbow joint or don't want to roll over the elbow joint much. I have to roll over once, and then of course I can say, okay, how much I want to adjust the massage pressure.
So of course you go first because the muscle is thicker. First you take it out a bit. Exactly, that's right. And then adjust it individually.
Yes, and then I also have the option, you just have to look, balance it a bit. How do I find my position here? And then I can also do really well. On the one hand, if I increase the pressure a little downwards, then I can reach the triceps really well. And sometimes there are points where I say, wow, I didn't think that would be so uncomfortable. Does it make sense when I've reached points that I say, even if I'm massaging the arm muscles, for example, that I'm either working under tension or whether I'm also moving, does that make any difference?
So in fascia technique, there is actually a special release technique from the therapeutic area that when we grab a fascia in the therapeutic area, we first go into a relaxed fascia, put it under tension, which in this case would be the massager, and then try to stretch it a little and stretch it. In other words, I'm using a stretching method combined with a massage method. That would actually improve the impact, the effect probably, I would say, from a therapeutic point of view.
Cool. But as I said, coming back to that, I also have the opportunity to get hold of the biceps and triceps and can, of course, also work with the various massage elements. And as I said, there are always a few points on the triceps that are worth doing something about. And also the biceps themselves. I can either use the arm or just move the arm miracle. Yes, that's basically the bottom line or the questions I keep getting from customers. Thank you very much, Patrick, for taking the time to take a look at this from your perspective. And yes, thank you for watching and all the best for you. Ciao.